Good morning. Thank y'all for the grace. So we want to move forward. We want to have a conversation with our co-leads here, the lovely Cassandra and Theresa, because we know a lot of people are interested in RPOP, not just what we're trying to do for the future, but how we operate and how we work together and how we really make this happen. So we want to have a conversation about that and give you all a chance to really ask some questions that might be lingering on your minds. So let's get into it. My name is Doneah Marshall. I work as the RPOP Administrative Support Specialist. First of all, thank y'all for being here today. We're so happy. Thank you. So I want to start this conversation off with one of my favorite things about RPOP, and that I've noticed since this convening started, is that it's customary to ask people, what's your connection to Russell? And I love that because it matters, right? And I don't think, people usually emphasize that. So I'll start with, telling you all a little bit about my connection to Russell and how I made it to RPOP. So I'm gonna be vulnerable, if that's okay. I'm gonna ask y'all to give me space. And, please just be here with me. So, Russell has a special place in my heart. People mention different West End neighborhoods, California, Smoketown. These are all neighborhoods of Louisville's West End, which is made of 9 predominantly Black neighborhoods. So I grew up in one of those, in Shawnee, which is actually neighboring to Russell. That's my maternal side, my mom's side, but my dad's side is from Russell. So this very building that we're standing in, like my dad grew up in this building. I don't know if, a lot of you made it to the RPOP office, that building right behind our office, the Russell Apartments. That used to be Russell High School, and I hope that's correct. Miss Jackie usually corrects me on the history. But that used to be Russell High School, and that's actually where my grandmother went. And that's where she got pregnant with my daddy at 15 years old, believe it or not. So I have so many connections in the Russell neighborhood. So honestly, joining the RPOP team was like a homecoming for me in a lot of ways. And I've learned a lot about myself, since being a member of this team. So my current role is Administrative Support Specialist, but Cassandra mentioned I've held a few different hats since joining. So I came on in 2020 as a Junior Community Outreach Specialist. So I was on the team with Miss Jackie, led by Miss Jackie. And we're really on the ground canvassing, making those connections and really building that genuine relationship that's necessary to run an organization like RPOP, a project like RPOP. So I joined in 2020. Transferred into an internship in 2021. Back on in 2022, and now we're here today. So I want to pass it over to the co-leads, and maybe you tell us a little bit about your background leading up to RPOP and what that looked like for you all.
Sure. I also want to start by saying Doneah says that she's our administrative support specialist, but she's so much more than that. You heard her voice talking about the Russell Storytelling Project. She's an amazing project manager. She does basically everything. And so I just want to lift that up, that she's not just taking notes and filing things and keeping us organized. She's a superstar. Yeah. So I'm Theresa Zawacki. I am one of 2 co-leads for Russell, A Place of Promise. I'm actually on loan from Louisville Metro Government in this role, and I co-lead our place-based initiatives, which are focused on wealth-building pathways related to housing, business development and strengthening, workforce development, and especially innovative opportunities to help people connect to things like Lift, and job opportunities and best practices around how employment should happen to respect all kinds of different aspects of people's lives. And then I also work on our pathway that focuses on collective ownership of neighborhood assets, and we're going to talk about all those things in depth later on. But our first project that focuses on this collective ownership opportunity is the development at 30th and Madison Street. Oh, and how did I get here? So, I have been personally and professionally connected to Russell for the last, I'm trying to decide, my oldest child is a senior in high school and graduating in a couple of weeks, but he is my first kid who went to Coleridge Taylor Elementary School in Russell. And so, he started as a kindergartner. There's 2 blended kids in my house. They both went to Coleridge Taylor. My daughter went to Coleridge Taylor. There's 4 teenagers in my house right now. And I, volunteered at the school. I coached a running club at the school, and we had 100 kids running around the track over at Central High School. And so from that perspective, I've been very connected to the neighborhood. My kids have friends in Russell, and all of that. But I also had the good fortune of having a professional career that focused on Russell, specifically on Russell. And so the last job that I had before I went on loan from Louisville Metro Government to this work was Senior Policy Advisor to Louisville Forward, which is the city's community and economic development agency. And as Senior Policy Advisor, I oversaw the Office of Redevelopment Strategies, which was pairing city money against the federal money and the state money that was pouring into the neighborhood in Beecher Terrace. And so there was a set of priorities that were really developed to invest in neighborhood level projects in Russell as a way to spread the change beyond what was happening in the footprint of Beecher Terrace. And so, you know, there have been lots of projects that have happened in Russell. We're going to see some of them later today with the villages at West Jefferson. We sort of claim the Republic Bank YMCA, even though it's on the wrong side of Broadway. And then, of course, we'll see 30th and Madison Street. But the Sports and Learning Center was one of the projects that I helped support. And so that has connected me to this neighborhood and given me a chance to build relationships and to learn from the people of Russell about what they think is special about the neighborhood. And there's a lot of special things in this neighborhood.
Right, so I'll start with the personal first. I have a lot of childhood memories in Russell. I've never lived in the neighborhood, but I had so many family events and celebrations that happened here. A lot of them included Jay's Cafeteria, which is now Chef's Face. Sundays after church, that's where we would go, especially if it was Mother's Day or if it was somebody's birthday. I see a lot of people nodding that are from here. That was the spot to go to, Jay's Cafeteria. And so to see it be in Chef's Face now, which is still pretty vibrant with a lot of businesses and community events there, is such a great thing to see. I also, I had a cousin that's just a couple years older than me that went to Central High School. And I felt like I went to Central at the same time she did. I was there all the time. She was a cheerleader, so during the summer times when they would practice and the football team would practice, I would be there trying to learn the cheerleading, moves. And I remember the still very hot gym at Central High School, sitting in that gym, and attending homecoming celebrations, all the homecoming parties. I would be there and walking from the stadium to Central. That is still to this day one of the biggest celebrations. Like almost every football game, that's what the drum line does. That's what the cheerleaders do. So I got to participate in that way. My sister got married in Russell at Broadway AME Church, and I went to summer camps at Central and at the Urban League, and so there's just so many connection points in the neighborhood for me. When I started to do community work, which is about 11 years ago, I started with Network Center for Community Change, NC3, and I was an organizer working with young people, and I led also a summer of canvassing where we knocked on over like 3,000, 4,000 doors and talking to folks on their doorsteps about summer opportunities for young people to get connected to, as well as adults that want to return to education. And so Russell was one of our neighborhoods, as well as Shawnee and Parkland. And so that was really my first, in my adult experience, really working in the neighborhood. And since then, I worked at the Urban League for about a little bit over 4 years, and I did youth development and education work, and was able to connect with so many residents, particularly young people and their families. That's what my work was centered around, and also doing advocacy work, so working with other youth-focused organizations around how do we organize and really support young people. And then shortly after that, time at the Urban League, I transitioned to Cities United. And although I thought I was going to be focusing on national work, and I did for about a year, I transitioned then to working on this project that, if you all were there last night, Anthony said I did not know how big this was. I did not. I transitioned into working on Russell, A Place of Promise. And so throughout the past 11 years and even before that, I've had this connection to the Russell neighborhood. And I think that it's been helpful in my role as co-lead for RPOP, really focusing on the promise of people. I have relationships with folks. It is my people. Whenever I look at in the neighborhood, I see my family reflected, I see my friends reflected. I have built relationships over the past few years that are so helpful. Even when putting on this event, I call people up, I'm like, hey, can you do this for me? They're like, yeah, I got you. But if it wasn't for my work over the past few years, I wouldn't have that. And so that is what the Promise of People is really about, is building authentic relationships that are meaningful. And we could not do that unless we had a connection, whether that is through family, that's through friends, that's through church. We could not do this work if we didn't have those connections, every one of us on this team. And through our connections, we're able to do shared learning. We talked about being able to travel and go to these different places. Those are shared learning opportunities. We talked about our work groups, how we meet either on a monthly or sometimes in the high points every week, virtually with Russell residents to talk about this work that we're doing. I had the opportunity to build out that curriculum, design those programs with my team. We do storytelling, we do artwork, and so many other things on the people side. But it's really been a privilege and an opportunity to do this with so many people that care about the community and do this in partnership with residents.
Can we get a quick round of applause for those stories? Thank you. It means so much to me. I mean, as you probably can tell, I'm a storyteller at heart. I have a passion for storytelling. And it matters because, we're talking about investing in people, investing in place. Those stories matter. It's why we're here, right? It's what connects us all. And I love, looking at those journeys and how they intersect. It's just beautiful to me, and I love being on this team. So I'm gonna transition a little bit. So, you both talked about how you got here. I think one thing that, people are very interested in is this co-lead dynamic and why that is, how it works. Can you speak to that a little bit?
You can start?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we think of the work that we do in Russell, we are investing in people and we are investing in place. And those two things are so intimately connected to each other that we could not do one without the other, because we would not be investing holistically if we left one of those two pieces out. And we would not be investing authentically if we did not have the relationship that we have between the people and the place. And so when you think about organizational structure and you think about how, first of all, let me take a step back. So it's not traditional for a community-based project to invest in both people and place to the depth, to the breadth that we are investing in people and place in the Russell neighborhood. Sometimes you see organizations that focus on one or the other, but it's very rare to see an organization invest deeply in both the people and the place of a neighborhood. And so when you think about this somewhat unconventional approach to investing in neighborhood, and investing deeply in relationships and power sharing and decision making and relationships with residents before you invest in the place-based, the housing, the commercial development, the whatever physical investments are happening in the neighborhood, it calls for a somewhat different approach to leadership. And so when we think about power sharing, when we think about building out this network of people who are in community together, both from a physical, we're all in the space of Russell, but also from the intellectual, from the philosophical, from the family nature of the work that we're doing, which I hope comes throughout this day and has already started with the great panel that Dr. Bennett facilitated this morning around the storytelling work that we do. This is a family, a community approach to the neighborhood. And so it calls for a different organizational framework and a different leadership structure and philosophy than a traditional organization where you have one person who's in charge of everything and everything else sort of falls under from there. We, in sharing decision-making with residents, are modeling something that we're already doing with the team, which is a collaborative, very flat-looking organizational structure where we have people who are in conversation and in collaboration with each other on just about everything that we do. There's very few and probably no meaningful decisions that get made in the absence of conversation with each other, on the team, with residents in the community. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later today. So the idea for co-leads really comes out of this idea that this is a collaboration, and it's a collaboration between people and place. It's a collaboration between staff and community. And in order to bring that vision to a reality in an organizational structure, it calls for two people to collaborate as co-leads. I could pass the mic to you, or I could keep talking. Okay. So the idea for co-leads really comes from this idea that there are two ways that we invest, one in people and one in place. And the structure of RPOP, it really contributes to this idea that both of those things are of the same priority, with people coming first. And so Cassandra and I talk every day, multiple times a day, over text, in person, on the phone, over email. And there's not a single day that goes by where we don't have some kind of meaningful conversation, meaningful touch point. That is the same when it comes to our communication with residents. There's not a day that goes by that we aren't reflecting on a conversation or actually having a conversation with Russell residents about the work that we do. And it would be inauthentic of us to step back from those conversations to just do the work in a silo. And we talked a little bit about, and there was a fabulous comment earlier, and I don't know if she's still in the room, about how the city is really good at silos. It's super comfortable. It's easy to just say, well, I just do this thing and I don't have to worry about anything else. That is not the kind of relationship that we want to have with the Russell community. And in order for us to not fall into those silos, it's essential that we have this co-lead relationship. Please talk.
So what I'll add to the structure, I think what has been helpful with this co-lead relationship is that, so I work at Cities United, Theresa works at Louisville Metro. We have been able to move very freely in organizing our work. Although we have, bosses, it's not in the traditional way whatsoever. You all heard Anthony. Anthony is very, on my side, it's very loose. He'll give me vision. He'll cast a vision and cast some guidance and some advice. But other than that, I just kind of move and do my thing. And I think that has been extremely helpful. And same with Theresa. She, how many years in Metro? A lot. She's been there, y'all. And she 17 years at Metro, and has built so many relationships, and also people, trust you, and has been able to just kind of move loosely. And so I think without having those strong strings, we've been able to do this work. And I think if we had tighter strings, we quite frankly, wouldn't be able to. So I think that's been helpful in our relationship. I would also say that, her and I are very different. I come from more of community organizing, networking, and just a different background and a career experience, right? And so, but our personalities are very similar. So, and we oftentimes, I don't know if we're gonna get to the, am I skipping? She's looking at me, am I skipping? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so, I love that my team also checks, they can, check me. So our personalities are similar in that we are very hard workers. And that can be on the downside of working too much and working too many hours. But we care so much about this work. And so because our personalities are similar, I think this co-director relationship works really well. We oftentimes refer to it as a marriage. We have to communicate all the time, whether that's through conflict or whether that's through success. If we didn't communicate, we wouldn't be able to move work forward. If we didn't have the same level of respect for one another, I appreciate what she knows, and I don't need to know everything that she knows. I need to be able to navigate in that space, but I don't need to know everything, and vice versa. And so being able to respect one another's expertise and approaches to the work has been extremely helpful. And I think that has also translated to the rest of the team and how we operate with them. I have been able, both her and I have supervised team members, and being able to kind of work them into this mix has been interesting and challenging at times. But it's been helpful to have this co-director relationship, not only to support the team, but also to take on this load of work. This is so much. The successes we've been able to have, I quite frankly, I don't think we would have been able to do this if it was just the traditional organizational structure. If we didn't have co-leads, if we weren't talking to the people first and then that influencing the play side, we wouldn't be here today. And so I think this is a structure that is very different to Louisville, but I think that this is something that should be replicated, and we're thinking through how this goes just beyond this incubation phase and goes into, this standalone entity, because it's been extremely valuable for to have someone to confide in, to think through things that are in the same conversations, but approaching it maybe differently. And she hears some things that I may not hear, in that certain way, or I hear some things and I'm like, I don't know, let's think through that. And so I think this is a model that really should be considered by other folks that are thinking about doing this type of investment work, because you do need two people or multiple people's voices and leadership at the table.
Thanks, y'all. I know y'all like to talk. Y'all always tickle me. But yeah, so, they mentioned people in place. That's how we think of our work, as this two-pronged approach where you can't address one without addressing the other, right? And Cassandra mentioned, she leads the people side, Theresa leads the place side, and they both kind of collaborate daily, every day, multiple times a day. Yes, all the time. So I want to talk a little bit about building a brand and what that looks like. You both supervise separate teams that all work together on the daily, but what does it look like to build a brand, build the RPOP brand?
So I'll touch on something that Althea touched on earlier when she spoke. So she was a part of the Cities United team, and although you were saying you weren't a part of the brand and communication, you were a guide for me when I came onto the team on the RPOP, working on the RPOP project. And our brand was, like she said, was not just like the logo, which I think is a great logo, and the colors, but it was how did we show up in community. That really mattered. So talking with the team about the importance of being ambassadors for this work, to show up and be really open-minded and treat people that like they are assets to the community, that they are creative, resourceful, and whole. And as Theresa mentioned, that culture had to show up in how we navigated our team, right? And so we have team meetings all the time, multiple times a week. We are consistently in conversations all the time because it is collaborative, and before we make decisions, we want to make sure we have multiple people's voices. And so I think that brand, like how our culture is established as a team, is what our brand is out in community, because what we do internally is what we try to do externally. We show up in our orange. I laughed this morning because we all kind of coordinated in our orange and our blue without even having a conversation about it. That's how in sync we are. But we show up. We show up with a smile on our face and making sure that we are hospitable, that we are putting people first. So hopefully, when you came in, you were greeted, that you felt the energy in the space, that you felt like family. Like even if you're not from Louisville, that you felt connected to this space. We want to make sure that happens in everywhere we go. There's always music playing. That's part of our brand too. Whenever we did virtual conversations, we had music playing. As soon as you logged on, you knew we were about to get started. So the first 5 minutes of a virtual meeting, we have music playing, and then we would always have like Miss Pat or Miss Ruth would say, "Oh, this is a good playlist. We need this. We need this playlist." And so that is a part of our brand. We want people to feel good. We want it to feel warm. We don't want it to be stuffy. We don't, and that also plays into our clothing too. We are very lax in our clothing. We want people to feel like that they can show up as they are, right? And so if we were in ties and suits and jackets all the time, or dresses all the time, then people would kind of feel like they have to show up a certain type of way. At the office, we come as we are. We are in sweatpants sometimes, and joggers and shorts, and and you said what? I said absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Virtually, we show up as we are, and so we wanted to make sure that people feel like they can show up as they are, that they're accepted, and that they're welcomed. And I think that is a part of our brand, is that anyone can be a part of this. No one is going to be left out. You all have a role, whether that is to be a photographer, videographer, that's to be the timekeeper in the back, that's to be the IT person, that is to be the greeter. Everyone has a role, and we are trying to help people find that talent, that skill, so they can show up. That is our brand in my eyes.
We also want to make sure you're fed. And so having food at meetings, all the food all the time. And we also want to make sure that your babies have something to do while you're hanging out with us. And so we always have childcare at community meetings and events, and special programming in partnership with our good friends at Play Cousins Collective that in most cases aligns with what the adults are talking about. So if we're having a conversation about community wealth building, the kids are doing an activity that is also focused on that, but in an age-appropriate way. And we want to make sure the kids eat too, so the kids usually eat first. And what we are really aiming for is this idea of family, and this idea that we are here together, the way that a family shows up together to be in community and to really just be in the space together and share the experience. And that really is at its core our brand.
One more thing to our brand. We talk about investment, right? We keep saying the word investment. The other part of our brand is we make sure people get paid. So with our residents, if they are participating in our work groups, especially the work groups that we were meeting every single week, that was like 2 hours of folks' time, even more, because we would give them homework assignments, and we would give them reading materials. That's a lot of time, especially if you have family, you're working a full-time job or multiple jobs. And so to spend time with us and to do the additional work means that you need to be paid. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this, like our work groups and kind of our structure around shared learning a little bit later. But all of our work group participants during the 2020, our first 2 cohorts, like our Russell for Russell coalition, and then the second work groups after that, they all received stipends. They varied from being $1,000 to like $2,500, as well as receiving laptops and hotspots, because we were meeting virtually, and there's a digital divide in the West End, so we want to make sure that accessibility wasn't an issue. And not only do work group participants get paid, but anyone that's contributing to this convening is also going to be paid, because we are paid to do this work. And so we believe if you're contributing your time, your talent, your energy to this work, you also deserve to be compensated for that.
I'm so glad y'all mentioned, we always want to make people feel welcome, and that's really what we're about. We always emphasize partnership because we know that we can't do this work alone. And that's why y'all are here, right? Like, and we're so grateful for it. Yes, you know, when we step into a room, Russell residents are the most relevant, and there's no question to that, but we know that it's gonna take a collaboration to get what needs to be done, right? So in speaking of collaboration and speaking of partnership, I wanna talk about incubation and fiscal sponsorship and what that looks like, who those people are, and what they do for us.
Yes. So I will talk on the Cities United side. Yes. So Cities United also has a fiscal sponsor. So we're a very complex structure that we probably should share a diagram for. But RPOP is a very complex structure that has required us to navigate quite a bit of processes and procedures, y'all. I would say that's definitely a challenge. So Cities United is also a fiscally sponsored project. We're a fiscally sponsored project at the Tide Center. They sponsor over 200 plus organizations across the country that are focused on social justice work. And so they are located in New York and in California. And if you're not familiar with what a fiscal sponsor is, oftentimes fiscal sponsors have the role of not only managing money, they hold the money and they manage that and they support the administration of it, but a lot of other fiscal sponsors also support the legal side of it, so contracts. If you know someone wanted to sue us, they would go through to the fiscal sponsor, and they also support our HR. At least on the CU side, they support our HR, our finances, and legal. And so that, as it pertains to RPOP, means that there's a layer that I have to go through oftentimes, and Anthony and I have to go through to make sure that we're in compliance with what's going on with Tides. And then we have our fiscal sponsor for Russell, a Place of Promise, which is the Community Foundation of Louisville. And so the Community Foundation of Louisville holds our money, our grants that we receive, our donations that we receive. And so there's a process that we have to navigate through them as well. And then there's also, they support us on the legal side. So we're balancing two fiscal sponsors at the same time, which can get a little bit confusing as we try to like navigate those ropes. And it can be frustrating at times for when we're trying to also maybe work with vendors. That has been an issue that has come up. But we work through it and we try to make things happen so that we meet our obligations to our vendors and to the community and to our team. But it's quite layered, and so I think there's a lot of good benefits from having a fiscal sponsor, especially as an incubator project. We really didn't. I mean, we had the vision and we had our overall goals, but really to navigate all this work, to have this time to figure out what type of entity we wanted to be, I think a fiscal sponsor made the most sense instead of just branching out and having that back office support already on the staff. Now we're at a place after 4.5 years where we're kind of like, well, we know when we branch off, we'll need a virtual CFO for right now, Chief Financial Officer, and we'll need a bookkeeper, but we're gonna outsource those things for support, and we found someone to help us do that. And we'll need to also outsource some other support as we continue to grow, but really that fiscal sponsorship relationship has helped us really identify some of the gaps that we need in some growth areas, so we know what our organization needs to look like in the next year or two.
Yep. And then on the city side, we get a lot of the same things that Cassandra just described that CU and Tides provide. So staff is the biggest one. So I'm on loan from the city. I've been on loan from the city since August of 2018. We've also been able to create positions to hire people to do project management over our place-based initiatives. And those folks have been city employees. They've drawn city benefits. All of it's grant funded. There's no city dollars in this project. Not many anyway. We also have had the benefit of the relationships with other team members at the city, and that has been so important for things like getting signs approved for 30th and Madison Street, and the property itself, and the commitment that the city has made to transfer title to that property and 75 vacant residential properties in the land bank to us once we launch. We've also had access to other city systems. So for a hot second, I was making maps. It is not my skill set. But I had a GIS login that I could not have had in the same way had I not already been a city employee. I don't make maps anymore, by the way. Best. There's also a city, it's sort of a property management system called Ptolemy, and there's information in that system related to property ownership and code enforcement and other permits that have been pulled for things like HVAC. And so I have a login for that system and can use it to pull a whole bunch of data into spreadsheets or maps that I don't make that help us understand a big picture about what's happening in Russell. And so beyond that, the political connections that we have because we are still incubated by the city are also really important. I'm not sure if she's still here, but Councilwoman Donna Purvis has been a big supporter of ours. Ja'Cory Arthur also represents part of Russell and has been a big supporter. David James, when he was a Metro Council person, also very supportive. Now we work with Councilman Philip Baker, who is likewise a great supporter of ours. And because we have the city connection, we have a different relationship with those elected officials than we might if we were just one of a sea of other organizations working in the neighborhood. So beyond that, we also get things like if we need an event permit to close off Muhammad Ali for our block party over homecoming. It's not a different process. We still fill out all the paperwork, but again, it's that relationship where there's a wonderful woman named Regina at Metro Parks who knows that I'm probably going to email her just to check in. And so we have that level of communication that, again, might be different if I was a random person emailing her saying, hey, where's my permit? So it's little things, but they add up to really, really big and meaningful things.
And I'll just add, also from Cities United's contribution to this work, we have our staffing, quite a bit of our staff have been the CU side, and that was intentional because it's the promise of people, and we talk about people first investment, and so we wanted to make sure that those were the first individuals that we really built up as a team, is that we had people to do community outreach, do community engagement. I would also say that Cities United's contribution to this has been able to have a national perspective, and that has been so meaningful. If it was not for the fact that we have a national footprint and able to have already so many connections with cities across the country and people that are doing this type of work or trying to do this type of work, I don't think we would have such a, our shared learning opportunities wouldn't look the same. When we were able to go to Baltimore last year, it was during our convening, our Cities United convening. And we were already going to be in the city, and so then we brought residents, we brought artists there, but we were already connected to folks in the city, and then we added some additional connections to go to the Community Land Trust up there, to go to art spaces. But it's because of CU's network of over 100+ different cities that we're able to do things like that. And I would also say from being able to be in those conversations with national leaders, sometimes working in Louisville, you can feel really isolated and it feels like you're working in a vacuum. And sometimes it feels like when you are bold and you ask for $5 million or $10 million, people look at you crazy. It's side-eyed, it is laughable, but then when you go to other cities, it's like, oh, that's chump change. Yeah. Like $5 million, yes, I can give that. And so for me, it's been such a confident boost and affirming that I'm able to have other individuals that are doing this type of work in other places to say, girl, that ask is okay. Have the confidence to say, yes, we need that amount of money to be able to be successful in this work. So CU has been such an eye-opener for me to have that national network, to have other, particularly Black women that are doing this work that I see as mentors, that are either in the space of philanthropy, or they're in violence prevention, or they're in community investment. They have been so helpful for me, and I would say the rest of the team, was saying to be kind of just like a motivation and encouragement, especially when it gets tough here in the city and people don't view your work in the same way.
Thanks, y'all.
So you heard a little bit more about our incubated partners, Cities United and Louisville Metro Government, and our fiscal sponsor, the Community Foundation of Louisville. And you also heard a bunch of names throughout that, right? You know, Supply Lab Media and TVG Media and Play Cousins Collective. All of this to say that we don't do this work alone, and it's impossible to do this work alone, to be quite frank. We do a lot, and we lean on a lot of people to get stuff done, and it works. So with all of these people playing a role, with all these people with hands in the pot, how do we ensure that alignment how do we ensure that values are aligned? What does that look like?
That's such a great question.
Oh, thank you, Cassandra.
So value alignment. So one of the things I learned very early on doing community organizing work was to just like sit down with like whoever you are working with and making sure that you are defining words together. Because I can say accountability is one thing, or community is one thing, or strategy means this, or trust means that, and I have my own definitions, and I'm gonna work my behavior, my actions, my decisions are going to follow how I'm defining those terms. But then if you're in conversation with someone else, they may define those words differently, and their behaviors and their choices are different, and then you're gonna be looking at each other very confused. Because it's like, well, I thought we all agreed that accountability was important. I thought we all agreed this was important. And so level setting at the very beginning before you engage with different partners is important. And having those conversations about how are we defining things, once we define accountability, how are we gonna hold each other accountable? And then working through like what our processes and our practices are gonna be. And we do that so much. Theresa and I do that so much. We have it down to a rhythm now, but still oftentimes we check each other to say, hold on, like if we need to make a decision about X, what are the processes, what are the steps we need to go through? There's probably about 15, 20 different steps that people don't see, but there's 15 or 20 different steps that we have to go through before we say yes to something or before we move in this direction. And so I would say taking time. A lot of people don't want to take time. We use the word urgent because this work is like people need us now. People are losing their homes. Our lives are being lost, and that is, we need to move with hunger. And our speed needs to be there. But sometimes when we talk about this sense of urgency, it gives us frantic. We react and we're very frantic in our decision making. And then when you get frantic in your decision making and you are rushing yourself, you skip things. You misstep. You leave people out. And so in this work, this has taught me that you have to slow down. And if you are not in conversation with other people, then that's a problem. If you are not having multiple conversations and you're not checking in with people to say, I heard this, does this make sense? Is this what you said? And then let me apply it this way. This is what I think the solution should be. And checking with folks, then you're out of alignment. That's not a good movement. And then I also think that's how people don't succeed. They don't move forward, is because they're not in consistent communication, consistent in step with the people that they're supposed to be working with. And so patience and taking the time to make decisions is so important. We do everything from, like I said, we meet a lot and we talk a lot, but our meetings are structured in a way to where we are taking that time to make those decisions.
I would also say that one of the first things we did with residents through our Russell for Russell Resident Coalition was develop a set of shared expectations and values for how we work in the neighborhood. And that's our Russell Partnership Pledge. And as we think about relationships with organizational partners, we ask them also to commit to the values that are outlined in that pledge as a statement of solidarity with the work that we're doing in partnership with residents. And there have been many times where we've had to go to partners and say, excuse me, this thing that you've just said or done seems out of alignment with our Russell Partnership Pledge. Could you go check that out? Could you go maybe just read the pledge values, and maybe we can talk about a solution. So it gives us a reference point, not that we made up, but that we made up, that really creates a baseline set of understanding about what accountability means, what transparency means, what power sharing means, and what it means to invest alongside residents as true partners, as opposed to just secondary thoughts that you probably have to deal with at some point that may or may not get in the way of your own personal vision, which is not the way that we work. So between the organizational culture and values and the Russell Partnership Pledge, that is really how we stay accountable, how we work as far as community goes.
Thank you. But no, what y'all saying is crucial, right? Value alignment. And I think one thing that really works for us as a team of 6 is that we're all personally aligned on our values. It kind of makes us a little bit closer and makes it a little bit easier to work with, right? And I think one thing that connects to for me is culture. And the culture that we've cultivated, and thinking of things like, let me pull out my list because I have a list. Productivity, employee care, operating as a startup, shared leadership and learning, thinking about like the intergenerational aspects. What does this culture feel like for you all, and how did you create it?
This culture, it feels good. How we created it, I will always say Network Center for Community Change is like how is the hugest influence on my work. And that was when I was 22 years old. And so I was super influential. It was super influential on me and how I understand myself and what I want to do for a living. It confirmed that I wanted to work with Black people and for Black people for the rest of my life. It feels comfortable. It feels home. But it also, at the same time, it feeling comfortable, it's also challenging because there's so many things that we face as Black folks. And so the culture that I feel like we have been cultivating is one that is full of Blackness, that says that you shouldn't be ashamed of your Blackness, that it's a celebration, that it's also acknowledgement of this. We also cuss a lot, so I will say that's part of our culture. It was about to slip out. That this shit is hard. Extremely hard, and we are ourselves when we show up. But it is difficult, and there are so many tears, both joyous as well as, sad tears when we hear different things, and as we are working through all the challenges. And I think that's part of our culture, to be vulnerable. This is hard work. This is, yes, we get paid to do this, but this is hard work. Like, this is not something, if I didn't get paid, I would still be volunteering. I would still be showing up. Whether it's, someone else's organization, or once we are ready to transition, I'm still going to support a Russell Place of Promise. And so our culture is one of like, this is so meaningful to us. And we want it to succeed. We want people, as we mentioned earlier, to feel welcome, to feel at home. And a part of that is like our employee with our team members. So we try to. I'm gonna say we try to, because Theresa and I feel. Yes, we need to do better. But we try to take every second and fourth Friday off. That's in our signature for CU, is that second and fourth Fridays don't work. And that's because we want to give our team rest. We do a lot. In the evenings, we are working almost, it feels like the past few weeks, almost like every evening. We work late, and that means like until 8:30, whether that's virtually or in person. We work on the weekends. And so to have second and fourth Fridays off means that there's rest. We also encourage team members to take vacation time. They don't always listen to me, but to take vacation, to be with families, to be with friends, to take a mental health day. Because if you are not okay, if you haven't taken the rest, you can't show up for other people. And so that's been a part of our culture. Also, what's some other things that you listed?
I got a couple.
Okay.
We also schedule emails. So if you don't know, Outlook and Gmail and whatever other email platform you're using probably lets you pick a time when that email actually goes out of your draft box. I might personally work on Saturday or Sunday, or at 6 o'clock in the morning because I'm awake, or at midnight because I really work better then. But I'm not going to email anybody else until 8 o'clock the next morning because I don't want to create the expectation, and Cassandra doesn't want to create the expectation that we're all 24/7 working all the time, checking our email, always connected because it's right here on my phone, and expecting that team members are going to email us back. That's not a good work-life balance. That's actually not a balance at all. That's just all work. And so if I know Kamara's on vacation, I'm not going to email him until 8 o'clock in the morning on the day he's supposed to be back from vacation. And if I know Doneah is taking a day off just to be, I'm not going to email her, and I'm going to real try hard not to text her because it's not that urgent. It can wait until 8 a.m. the day they're supposed to be back. And if they don't check that email until 11 o'clock in the morning they're back because they got 50 emails, that's cool too. So it's things like that, like respecting boundaries, respecting that we all have lives outside of Russell Place of Promise is super important, especially when it comes to mental health.
I would also add that we diversify how we work. We oftentimes try to work at different places or different, so we do like work sessions every quarter, whether that's a day or 2 days, where it's just like from 9:30 to like 5, we are working on with the quarter, what we're reflecting. We do a lot of reflection, let me say that. We do a lot of reflection, a lot of debriefing. And I think that is such a big part of how we're able to continue to move, because it is that reflection and that debriefing requires us to pause. To be intentional about our next steps, to make sure that if we missed anything, that we're able to catch one another and say, okay, so what I learned from this then informs my next step. So we do a lot of debriefing. We do try to switch up how we work in the spaces that we work in. A few weeks ago, Theresa and I did a gym meeting. So we walked from our office at 18th and Muhammad Ali to the YMCA at 18th and Broadway. Along the way, we stopped by some of the childcare centers that are going to be in our childcare business accelerator to drop off some gift cards. We were at the gym on the treadmill talking about our work, and then we took a tour of the facility so it could pull from inspiration for 30th and Madison, talk to some more folks, then walk back, and we felt good. We got our exercise in, and we also were able to engage in community and use a new community asset. So we're also always thinking about creative ways to not just do the regular, because we don't like the regular at all. And so I think that's part of our culture. Like you never know what's really next, and that's exciting for us. I think that also speaks to our personalities and why we work together so well. It's like we are always like, well, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And then what if? Okay, like edit me, please, edit me. Or maybe I'm doing too much. I say that quite a bit. But it's fun to be able to dream with someone and be able to think about new things. And it's like, we don't look at each other like we're crazy. We're like, well, then how do we actually make that work if we're trying to do that? And then if we can, we let each other know that that's not going to work. But our culture is also like that innovation is so integral into what we do.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I had mentioned that I wanted to, elaborate on a little bit, just for a quick second, is the shared learning and the shared leadership, which is also a huge aspect of our culture. I don't think people always realize how good these two are at delegating. So you heard them mention that me and Daphne led the Storytelling Project. We got Marcus leading our ambassador program. We got Kamara leading things like the Neighbor Circle and helping out, really doing a big lift with 30th and Madison Street. So that's something that we also engage in. In addition to, working in shared learning with Russell residents, we do a lot of shared learning and shared leadership amongst ourselves. And I think that really allows this to work. So I have one more question because I know we're short on time and we want to get to Q&A. Money. How much does this cost?
A lot.
What's a lot?
So Russell Place of Promise's annual operating budget is $1 million. It is real staff heavy. So there are 6 of us right now, which is a shrinking of our staff. As we get closer to our launch and closer to staffing a new organization. but at our peak, there were 11 of us. And if we had 11 of us right now, that would be great, but 6 is good. But it takes money to be able to do this work, and especially to be able to do a lot of the things that we've said are part of our culture and part of our values. So traveling with residents, paying residents for their time and their treasure and their talent that they're sharing with us, that costs money, like real money. It costs money for us to put on programs where we're able to provide childcare and food and safe spaces for people to come together. It costs money to run a home repair program or run a small business accelerator that comes with meaningful investment in people's businesses. And so it's about $1 million a year to do all of this. And we are 100% grant funded. We don't have a regular, nobody's given us a ton of money from other places. It's just grants that we've raised. And that's pretty typical for a nonprofit.
And I would speak to the money piece. So Keenan Charitable Trust, in order for RPOP to launch, gave us $5 million. And it came with a match. And so that was $5 million for 3 to 5 years. And that match was $10 million in kind in real dollars. So I will say we are very unique in that we had that much funding come up front. That alleviated some of the stress that we had around fundraising so that Theresa and I and Anthony and the rest of the team could focus on actually doing the work. So if you are working in another city and you're interested in this model, or you're in Louisville and you're from another neighborhood, that's what I would say is one of the biggest pieces of this, is to make sure you have a good chunk of money up front. Because because Theresa and I still fundraise, our model has been that if we can fundraise for all of our programs and keep some of the Keenan money safely kept so that we can use that money for the next few years, then that would offset, we don't have to keep pulling from that fund. And so that's allowed us to have still about a little bit over $2 million still in our Keenan fund because we've been able to fundraise outside dollars. So our exhibit that we talked about, our Russell Storytelling Project and our home repairs, that was funded by a Humana grant. That was at $250,000 that they provided. So that's why we were able to pay the artist, and why we were able to do the exhibit, and how we were able to do our home repairs. The same with being able to travel. The reason we were able to go to 3 different places last year is because James Graham Brown Foundation came in with $500,000 to say, we believe in you all's ability to be able to take work group participants different places and also be able to pay them. So if it wasn't for that, we would be definitely dipping into those Keenan dollars, but we have been able to offset those costs. And we are, and part of this, what we're doing over these 3 days is to say we need additional investment to keep this work going, because as you all will see with the 30th and Madison Street unveiling this evening, this is going to be a major project that's going to need so much more investment. It's also going to need so many more experts in this work that care about Black wealth building. Whether you are an owner's rep, which is something I learned last year that I had no idea what it was, whether you're an owner's rep, whether you're a lawyer, whatever role, we are going to need those staff members to be able to, or outsource the contractors to make sure that this work is feasible. And so that requires money to be able to do those things. And so we have been very blessed with the Keenan Foundation money and with additional folks that have came on board to support this work, but much more is needed.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you all, for coming up here and being vulnerable to Okay, we don't have much time, but we do want to, if anybody has any lingering questions, maybe two or 3 questions. I seen your hand first.
Yep.
Now mark the spot.
I'll say I'll stop these.
Nah, you good. I'm just playing.
Sorry, I'll speak. On my way.
Thank you, guys. I've been kind of dying to ask this question for a long time. I'm Alexa Rosenberg with Enterprise Community Partners, which is a national organization that has the privilege of working with RPOP. So, Cassandra, feel free to answer this if you'd like to, but primarily this is for Theresa. This is work that centers Blackness, right? And obviously, you are a white woman, I am a white woman. There are other white folks in the room thinking about how to support authentically. I'm interested in your perspective on what it looks like to be a real white co-conspirator.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I do get asked that question from time to time. And I think that what it means is a decentering of self that white people tend to sort of be cultivated into. It involves a true respect and appreciation for my wonderful, wonderful, very talented Black colleagues. And it involves a pretty healthy sense of, like, it doesn't have to be me in the spotlight. Like, I don't actually really need to talk at all. As long as I am contributing and sharing relationships and sharing what I know and sharing what I can give to the project, it's really about, being a support and being a person who isn't in this, like, I'm not in this for my own ego or my own, like, what am I gonna do next with this RPOP thing? It's really about, for me, being a partner more than being the face or the, like, leader or the person who knows everything, because I don't actually know everything. And showing up in ways that reflect that, like, I'm not here to be the leader, I'm not here to be the face, I'm not here to be the person who knows it all. I'm here to just be a partner and to be a team member and to be a supporter and a giver and a what can I do to help kind of supporter. It is a huge privilege to be able to work in this neighborhood and with this group of people that are part of this team. And for me to have come in not thinking that I was going to learn and that I was going to grow and that I was going to benefit and that I was going to, like, grow as a person, and I don't mean benefit like what am I going to get out of this RPOP thing, but, like, how am I going to benefit as a human? I think it would have been a different situation. I think it would have been less collaborative. I think it would have been less authentic. I think it would have felt less like a family than it does. And I hope that answers your question. But I really do, I can't emphasize enough that it's really like the decentering of the self and the ego in this work that really helps white people show up, not as jerks.
And they know I'll ask questions, even though I wasn't part of it, like, what about this, what about this? So, thinking about the possibility of replicating this leadership model, this shared leadership model across, the city, across the region, and so forth, do you have to be exceptional? So if you were thinking of a job description, if you are able to replicate, because the takeaway is, like, I need to be a Cassandra, I need to be a Theresa, like, that's the only way, they can only do it. So what does it look like in terms of a job description, or who could stand there to create this type of project, or is it just unique?
So no, we don't think it's unique. So one of the things the many things that we're going to do over the next several months is really do a better assessment of our leadership. We talk about, like, our personalities are similar, but what about our personalities make this thing work? And how are we different also? And that also makes the project work. And so, no, I think that this isn't unique. I think it can be duplicated. I'm also just really interested in, like, what duplication looks like and success looks like in that duplication and how it differs from this, because I also think people can be very different than us as long as you care about the community in which you are working with, that there are relationships there, but the expertise and the skills can be different. So Theresa, she didn't mention this, she's an attorney also, so she has that legal background that has been super helpful for us in navigating things. But it could be someone, maybe it doesn't necessarily have legal expertise, but maybe they have expertise in some other field, and it could be someone that's in my position that maybe doesn't have the history of doing like organizing work, but maybe they have the history of, you know, working in like, say, faith community or something, and they're bringing those skills into this work. So we need to do an assessment of that, but I do think this is something that can be taken to other places. I'm gonna make sure
I got a couple things. So when we talk about the place of promise model, what we're really getting at is like the heart of the work. So the relationship between the people and the place, and how you invest in both simultaneously to get these things done. It's not that you have to have a lawyer and you have to have someone with a deep background in community organizing. It's that you need to bring these elements of the work to the space. Because when we think about Russell, it's different than California, it's different than Smoketown, it's different than Newburgh, it's different than Chickasaw. And the people in Russell have a different perspective than people in Newburgh about their neighborhood. And so it's not possible to replicate Russell, a place of promise, in Newburgh or Chickasaw or Smoketown or California. But there could be a California, a place of promise, that has leadership that reflects the community, that has deep experience in that space, and that understands the value of building relationships with the residents and the organizations that call California home. And so when we think about how this model gets transferred to other neighborhoods in Louisville, in Grand Rapids, in New York, in Florida, and wherever, it's not that it has to look just like Russell, a place of promise, where it has a Cassandra and a Theresa and a Daphne and a Kamara and a Marcus and a Doneah. It's that the process of building relationships and having those relationships with residents drive investments in place. That's what's key to Russell, a place of promise, and the place of promise model. So it's open. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, oh, we got one more question.
So we'll do one more question in the back.
Oh, no, we got one
Oh,
here.
I'm so sorry. We'll do two. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I just want to say job well done, ladies. I think that this room is heavily populated by women, which I think is amazing because I truly believe that the future is female. And so my question kind of leads in that direction a little bit. Where I come from, it is highly political. There's a lot of great wealth in the neighborhoods that I serve that have made investments there. And I want to know, what advice do you have about speaking the language of the white man? And what it has been like for you being a woman in leadership when people work in such hard work?
You say that first.
I get to take that one first. So, what a multi-dimensional question you have asked. So thank you. It is a challenge, and I will start with the women in leadership question first, and then I'll take on the white man question, which is it's a real one, and philanthropy is pretty white. So from my perspective, I have always been in rooms that were mostly made up of men, and frankly, mostly white men. Law school, super duper white, super duper lots of men. Although I was very fortunate that at the University of Cincinnati, where I got my law degree, the class that I was in was like 54% women, so we were in the majority, and that was it was in the early 2000s, and so that was just starting to be a trend where there were more women going to law school than men, but not many. But when you get into private practice in law or public sector practice in law or do a lot of other work, especially in government, there's a lot of white men. And I would sit in a room, my practice group was mostly men. I did work in a private law firm for a while. And the partners that I worked with were both white men. And the practice group that we were part of, the real estate group, was mostly white men. There was one woman, she was also white. And that's a tough space to show up in because there are perceptions about like, aren't you the paralegal? Can you get me a cup of coffee? That persist even today. And so it can be difficult to carve out a space and to carve out a reputation for competency when you're in those kinds of rooms. And a lot of it is being clear in your voice and clear in your confidence and showing up in ways that aren't, you know, like I'm not showing up and yelling at people or like making sure that people know I'm gonna talk. But there's for women to show up in those spaces, there's a way to sort of work in so that you do show up and people know you're gonna talk and they know you're not gonna get them that cup of coffee and you're not the paralegal. And it can be tricky and it can be frustrating, especially as a young person starting a career, to be in those spaces and to show up. And so what I will say is that there have been women for me along the way, along the course of my career, who have also been in those spaces, who are mentors, who are people who I may not have like a let's go get coffee and talk about this kind of mentorship relationship with, but who I've watched from a distance and watched how they show up and watched how they speak and watch how their presence is carried in a room. And those are the kinds of things that I've tried to model over the course of my own career. But I also want to talk about the white men in the room. That's tricky. And I will say that one of the things that I think may have been helpful to us in this relationship that Cassandra and I have is that I'm white and Cassandra is black and we show up together with funders, especially the white men ones and all of them. And that our relationship is co-leads and that our relationship is mutual respect. And so we try really hard to tag team those conversations and it's not always comfortable for either of us. But it does set this expectation that like, I'm not in charge of Cassandra, we're co-leads and Cassandra is her own person and she's got her own voice and she's got her own message and she's worth your time and respect. And that, although it doesn't erase the fact that it's definitely a white guy sitting across the table from us and that white guy definitely has ideas and sometimes doesn't remember Cassandra's name, it helps to emphasize that we're in this together, there's value in what we're saying and like value in what both of us are saying. And I try to take a step back as much as possible and let Cassandra lead in those conversations. Because I want it, like it's important that like it's not, oh, I'm the white person showing up for Russell Place Promise, you gotta listen to me, but like it's both of us together. And this is a Black-led initiative with a team of very talented Black individuals who are moving this work forward. And you can't just talk to the white lady in the room because I'm like I'm the like lowest number of people in the team.
So I know we just have a little bit of time left, so I'm gonna try to get through this quickly. So this has been an extremely challenging area for me, quite frankly. And because yes, I'm a Black woman, I'm also I'm young Black woman in this work that people oftentimes I'm in conversation with will say, I've been in this game for 20 plus years, I know I've seen everything, and that can be extremely frustrating to be, oftentimes I have been the youngest person in the room, so not only am I a Black woman, but I'm the youngest. I also, the way that I show up is also not traditional, like professional, like I have big hair all the time. I have nose rings. I'm oftentimes with my gold hoops, that's like my signature. I'm kind of wearing them today, but that's how I show up, and I try not to switch up the way that I speak or how I act or I perform for folks. And so that can be at times, when we go in conversations with funders that are white, it's like Theresa and I have those conversations. Like, I'm just gonna say, I don't wanna be here, like, honestly, because it makes me feel like I have to convince white folks of our humanity, my humanity, why Russell is worth being invested in, and that's frustrating, and that feels dehumanizing. Now, do I do it? Yes, but it's uncomfortable. And so what has been helpful for me is to have a team of people that I can talk with to say, like, this is a meeting I was just in, and it was just like super frustrating. Or how do I want to strategize before going into this meeting? How should I show up? What are some things? How do we get straight to the point? I'm also like, I don't want to do small talk. This is like, I want to get in and I want to talk business if I'm going to talk about financial things, especially when I'm not comfortable. So we're going to get straight to the business and why I feel like the investment is important. And I think having a team of people that see me and understand me, and also having mentorship that Theresa talked about, is super important. That has been something that I've been working towards over this past year, is finding Black women that are older than me that have been doing this work for a really long time, that can say, have those words of encouragement, to give the guidance and give that advice, and that I can just call on, or we can sit down and have coffee, or oftentimes it's my peers. I mentioned Kristen Williams, who Play Cousins Collective, and there are several other Black women here locally that are doing phenomenal work that I have built relationships with, and those have all been very intentional. And we're in conversations with one another on a consistent basis, because they hear some things and I hear some things. It's like, let's kind of like talk about what we're hearing and what we're really like assessing in the city of what's happening, because I know those conversations are happening with white folks, and I'm left out. We're left out. And there have been conversations that have happened where I'm sitting at the table with folks, and there's a conversation that's happening. I know it's happening. Another language is being spoken. I don't know what it is though, but there's a lot of weeps. And there's a lot of like, oh, I know this person, I know that person. And so I can sit there and I have felt like I don't even live here. Like, this is a different city. I don't even, and it's because, again, I think it's a generational thing. I think it's a class thing. I think it is because I'm a woman. I think it's because I'm Black. But those conversations happen so much. And so I would say, if anyone is in this type of work trying to build it out, is to make sure you got some good peers and good mentorship, because you're gonna need it. Because the amount of tears I've shed is ridiculous. And so we're fortunate to be where we're at financially, and have funders that are like, yes, let's support, but that the amount of conversations that we've had to have to get here is just, whew, it's a lot. So.
I'm so sorry. If there's any lingering questions, please feel free to grab these two individually. But we do have to wrap up this session. I want to thank you all once again for joining us today. And let's go ahead and eat. We got lunch to your left, my right. So please feel free to go grab you a plate.